What in the world? Link, what are you doing?
Well, I'm not buying a new controller. They're mad expensive. Guess I gotta do some Joy-Con surgery on this, so stick around. Before we start fixing the Switch Joy-Con's drift, we're gonna need a few tools. I'll link them below too.
A tri-point Y00 screwdriver, Phillips number 00 screwdriver, spudger, tweezers, and an opening pick. Ghoulie Kit has awesome replacement joysticks that come in pairs.
Since both the right and left Joy-Cons have their own set of steps for repair, we'll start with the left first. It's an easier repair. So, let's get cracking.
On the back of the Joy-Con, there are 4 screws. Remove them with a tri-point Y00 screwdriver. Slip the opening pick into the bottom seam, and make sure you don't go too deep. Carefully slide the opening pick up and around the rest of the seam. There are 2 ribbon cables still attached to both sides, so gently open up the Joy-Con. First, we'll remove the battery. Using a spudger, pry up the battery connector from its socket. The battery is attached by a small piece of tape, so take the opening pick and use it to gingerly pry it out. Like any battery, if you puncture it, it could catch fire. On the mid-frame underneath, there are 3 screws that you'll need to remove with the Phillips number 00 screwdriver. Again, there will be a ribbon cable still attached to the mid-frame, so lift it up gently. With the spudger, flip up the ZIF connector lock on the ZL button ribbon cable. Use a tweezer to pull the cable out of its socket. Do the same with the ribbon cable that connects the minus button to the motherboard. The blue ribbon cable is the last one you'll need to remove. Flip its ZIF connector lock up and pull the ribbon cable out of its socket. Remove the 2 screws holding the Joy-Con in place with the Phillips number 00 screwdriver. Carefully lift up the joystick and cross your fingers the black gasket underneath doesn't pull up with it. Aw man, gotta put that back and pretend that didn't happen. Place the new joystick in and screw it into place with the Phillips number 00 screwdriver. With a tweezer, slide the joystick's ribbon cable back into its socket. I actually had a hard time with this, but as with everything so far, be gentle. Then flip its ZIF connector lock back down. Do the same with the other ribbon cables we pulled out before. Flip the mid-frame back on top of the motherboard and use a Phillips number 00 screwdriver to put back its 3 screws. Place the battery in its housing. Use tweezers to line up the battery connector with its socket. With the spudger, press it into the socket. Snap the back cover over everything. And use a tri-point Y00 screwdriver to put back its 4 screws.
With one controller down, we have another to go. And the right Joy-Con repair is very similar to the left, except it has one more part and the ribbon cable is very tricky.
Remove the 4 screws on the back of the Joy-Con with a tri-point Y00 screwdriver. Slip a tiny bit of the opening pick into the bottom seam. Carefully slide it up and around the rest of the seam. There are 2 ribbon cables still attached to both sides, so gently open up the Joy-Con. We'll remove the battery first. Using a spudger, pry up the battery connector from its socket. The battery is attached by a small piece of tape, so take the opening pick and use it to gingerly pry it out. Make note of which way the antenna cable is facing. Then use a spudger to lift up the cable from its socket. On the mid-frame underneath, there are 3 screws that you'll need to remove with a Phillips number 00 screwdriver. There will be a ribbon cable still attached to the mid-frame, so lift it up gently. The ZR button ribbon cable is a pain in the butt to put back, but it's better to be safe than sorry by removing it and preventing any damage to that cable. Next, flip up the blue ribbon cable's ZIF connector lock. Then pull the ribbon cable out of its socket. Remove the 2 screws holding the joystick in place with a Phillips number 00 screwdriver. Carefully lift up the joystick so that the black gasket underneath doesn't pull up with it. Place the new joystick in and screw it into place with the Phillips number 00 screwdriver. Slide the joystick's ribbon cable back into its socket with a tweezer. Flip its ZIF connector lock back down. And now for the challenge. Using a tweezer, slide the ZR button's ribbon cable back into its socket. Flip its ZIF connector lock back down. Flip the midframe back on top of the motherboard, and use a Phillips number 00 screwdriver to put back its 3 screws. Place the antenna cable back, and make sure it's facing the exact way from before. I find it easier to hold the cable with the tweezer, and then push it into its socket with the spudger. Put the battery in its housing, and then press the battery connector into its socket. Snap the back cover over everything, and use a tri-point Y00 screwdriver to put back its 4 screws.
With the new joysticks installed, we'll need to calibrate the Joy-Cons.
On the home screen, tap System Settings. Scroll down to Controllers and Sensors. Then scroll down and tap Calibrate Control Sticks. Tilt the joystick you want to calibrate and hold it in that position for a few seconds. When it's fully calibrated, the plus sign should be in the center. If the circle isn't a plus sign, then it needs to be recalibrated. Tap X to calibrate it. Tilt the joystick to move the circle in each direction that the arrow indicates. Then rotate the joystick 2 to 3 times in a large circle. When the calibration is complete, the plus sign should be in the center. To calibrate the next controller, tap B to go back. Tilt the other joystick and hold it there for a few seconds. Surprisingly, this one was perfectly calibrated. But just to be safe, I recalibrated it anyway.
Now, if out of nowhere you end up having a similar problem with your PlayStation 3 controller, we have a how-to on that, so check it out here. And if you're a jack of all trades like us, and you like learning a plethora of things, be sure to check out our how-to hub and subscribe. I'll catch you in the next project. This wasn't bad to fix.